Hey guys, what's going on? Pastor Nate here. If we haven't had the privilege of meeting yet, I am the associate campus pastor here at our OKC campus. And so today, the video that you are watching is we're talking about altar etiquette. And if you're watching this, is for, basically, if you're interested in joining our prayer team, this is something that we have everybody watch just to make sure we're all on the same page. Or maybe you're already part of the prayer team and I've simply asked you to watch this just to make sure that, we are all aligned and we are on the same page. So what I want to do is I want to go over 9 practices, and I'm not going to take that long. I promise. I'm going to try not to. And we're going to try to make this video 10 minutes at the most, hopefully a lot less. But I want to share with you some important guidelines that I want all of us to follow when it comes to our prayer team, or 9 principles or 9 practices that I want us to implement. So number 1 is this, is that if you want to be a part of a prayer team, practice number 1 is this, is always attempt to minister to the same sex. Always attempt to minister to somebody of the same sex as yourself. So it's very easy to become emotionally attached to individuals when ministering to their spirit and soul, because prayer is such a spiritual thing. It's such a soul thing that it's easy to get emotionally attached whenever you become spiritually, whenever you're spiritually invested into it. So, that's why we try to say, be careful to ministering of the opposite sex. And sometimes you can't help it, sometimes you can. But as much as possible on your part, be careful in that area. The second thing comes right along with that, is that if you can't help it and you have to minister to somebody of the opposite sex, be wise. When ministering to the opposite sex, be wise. Learn to, I'll say this right here. Number 1, learn to cover your teammates. Learn to watch out for your teammates. By that, this is what I mean, is that if you notice a teammate of yours, somebody in the prayer team, is ministering to somebody of the opposite sex, one of the things that I would do is, if I noticed that one of our girls were praying for a guy, I would go over and I would take the initiative and I'd say, hey sis, listen, it's so awesome that he came up to you, bro. I'm so glad you came up for prayer. Can I pray with you? Or I'd come, if they're already in the middle of prayer, I'd come there and I'd lay hands on both of them, both their shoulders, just so that way they would know that there's somebody else there as well too. Because here's the thing, is that you never know if you're ministering to somebody who's attracted to you, for better or for worse. Some of you guys lack confidence. Some of you guys think you're good looking, not good looking. I don't know. But here's the thing, is that, somebody may be attracted to you, and that's why they're coming up to you for prayer. So you want to be careful in that. If you are ministering to somebody of the opposite sex, another thing that we say is you want to be sensitive to where and how you touch them. And I know this sounds so common sense, but I feel like we have to say it just so that we're all aligned and we all have clarity on this. Be careful in how you touch them. I remember when I was a youth pastor, if a youth, if one of my youth guys would come up to me and would ask me for prayer, I'd be all over them, I'd hug them. I'm like, come here, boy. And we'd be praying and we'd be going at it. But if somebody of the opposite sex were to come, I would stand at least, arm's length apart, and I'd ask for permission. I'd say, hey, can I touch your shoulder? Or if they would hold their hand, I'll say, okay, can I hold your hand? And I'd make sure there was space for Jesus. Because here's the thing, is that you never know the past of what somebody went through. So you want to be honoring and you want to ask them. You just want to be really wise in how you do that. Number 3, family issues. Don't promise that relationships will mend. People will come up to you and they'll pray, say, Pastor Nate, would you pray that my son would come back to me? Pastor Nate, would you pray that my marriage would work out? I'm trying my best. I'm doing what I need to do. Guys, here's the thing, is that you and I both know this, is that we cannot will, and God will not will against another person's will, that everybody has free will. And so I would never promise that the relationship would mend. What I would do is I would pray, God, would you stack the deck in their favor? God, would you surround them with people who would encourage them back to you? Father, would you pray that the Holy Spirit would help them remember, the right things? But I would never promise that a relationship would come back, because, we can't will against another person's will. And what I would encourage them to do is I'd encourage them, are you doing your part? Are you doing what you need to do to make sure that you're the best person possible? And because at the end of the day, the only person that they can control is themselves. So I would never make promises in that sense when it comes to family issues. Number 4, if a person needs God's grace or mercy, have them pray. People will come up to you and say, I messed up, I've really done this thing, and I just need God's forgiveness. Dude, listen, what I tell them is, listen, I'm not I'm not the Mother Mary. I'm not the negotiator. I'm not the middle person. You can go straight to Jesus for that stuff. So what I would do is that if a person needs God's grace and mercy, I would ask them, I would say, hey, listen, why don't you pray? And as soon as you're finished praying, I'll pray for you. And 10 times out of 10, because I've never had a negative response yet, man, that person, but okay, that sounds good. And then I pray after them and problem solve. Number 5, following the prayer, discuss practical next steps that they can continue to grow. Following the prayer, discuss practical next steps they can take to continue to grow. Because here's the thing is that people need to realize that maybe prayer was just a part of the solution that they needed, but it wasn't the end all. And that's why God gave us the body. So maybe discuss some practical steps that might be, hey, maybe their next step is joining a small group, or maybe their next step is joining an Equip class, or maybe their next step is joining a freedom class that has to do with addictions and bondages and all that stuff. And so discuss with them some practical steps they can take to continue to grow in their walk with the Lord. Number 6, which is really, really important, be sensitive to the individual leading the ministry time. Be sensitive to the individual leading the ministry time. If a person leading the service chooses to lead the service in another direction or end the ministry time, then guess what? Man, so as your ministry time, because we don't want you to be a distraction to the main thing of what's going on. Because here's the thing, is that 1 Corinthians 14:32 says that the Spirit is subject to the prophet. And so as prayer team members, we need to be mature enough to realize that, listen, God may have laid something on our heart, but just because he laid it on our heart doesn't mean that we're out of control and that we have to do it. Man, if God's given us a word and the person leading the time says it's time for us to move on, or maybe we're going on to our preaching time, maybe the appropriate response would be to say to that person you're ministering to, hey, listen, God's given me something to say to you, and I feel like he's dropped a word on my heart, but maybe I'll tell you later. Or maybe the correct response would be, hey, listen, let's continue ministering, some other time, or maybe, in our prayer room. And that way we don't be a distraction to the other people. So we want to be sensitive to the person leading the ministry time. Number 7, avoid giving your opinion and give biblical solutions. Avoid giving your opinion and give biblical solutions. Basically, what I'm saying is don't turn prayer time into counseling time. Man, what you want to do is you want to give them chapter, book, and verse, but you don't want to talk about, oh man, I've been through the same thing. Let me tell you what happened in my life. And let me tell you, because what happens then is that, man, it's a counseling session. And listen, man, some people need counseling, but we have awesome counselors on staff. We have Pastor Yolanda who's here to help, and we also have an awesome counseling center that we refer people to. And so give biblical solutions. And if a person needs counseling, man, make sure that you hook them up with Pastor Yolanda or myself, and we can point them in the right direction. But we don't want to turn prayer time into counseling time. Number 8, if a serious issue arises, never swear to secrecy. If somebody comes up to you and says, hey, can I tell you something, but promise me you won't tell anybody else, man, I would say tell that person, man, I'm so honored that you'd want to trust me or something like that. But I just want to let you know that if I feel like the best thing for you is for me to share whatever it is you're going to share with me, I'm going to share it. Because what happens is that if a person struggles with cutting or, thoughts of suicide or abuse, you don't want that on you. And you want to make sure that you go through the proper channels. And so never swear to secrecy. And the last thing, the 9th thing I want to share with you is be a man or woman of your word at the altar. So if during your prayer time, you talk to somebody and you say like something like, hey, man, it's so awesome what God's doing through you. I want to give you this book. If you come back, later on next week, man, I'm going to give you this book. You want to make sure that you're a man and woman of your word and that you give them that book next week. Or if you say to them, hey, man, it's so awesome that God's doing this thing in you. God's doing that thing in me too. Let me call you. Let me follow up on you. If you say that, you want to make sure to follow up with that person. Why? Because, man, you just want to make sure to be a man or woman of your word. So those are 9, principles, 9, things that we want to make sure that all of our prayer team partners are on the same page about. And that's our altar etiquette for the day. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.